Hey everybody, it's Alexander Dahl with Manifest Brutality once again. So today I have the final interview for this current wave of the interview series that I've been doing. So we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and then in a couple weeks or so I'll start putting out feelers to start scheduling more interviews. So without further ado, here you go. All right, so I'm currently on the phone with Joel. He's another person that reached out about the interview series, and I'm going to go ahead and give him a chance to introduce himself.
My name is Joel Miller. I wrote a book called Memoir of a Roadie. Axel said I made a great cup of tea, and that was actually the original name of the book, but we changed it because my friend said nobody would know what the book's about. So it's now called, it's just called Memoir of a Roadie, but I wrote the book.
Awesome. So you were generous enough to send me a copy of the book, so I have a little bit of intrinsic knowledge going into this interview about it. But why don't you kind of get us started? Like, where did music kind of first touch your life, and then what was it about music that once the opportunity came up, you're just like, I'm doing this?
So as a little kid, my parents actually didn't listen to any music really, but I remember listening to John Lennon Imagine, and it just came on radio. And I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. And I somehow found out that you could buy a tape and listen to it again if you wanted. And I went, ooh, I want to hear it again. So that was the first one that hit me. And then I grew up across the street from a guy named Angelo Moore, who's a singer of a band called Fishbone. And I just thought he was the coolest guy. He'd have great house parties, and he just has so much charisma. And I thought he was the neatest dude. So I didn't know I wanted to work in music, but I thought I did. And I just definitely wanted something cool, something to talk about that was neat, that was enjoyable, that was a life experience that wasn't the norm. Mm-hmm. And I blame Angelo for all of this mess.
So when the opportunity came for you to start working on a tour, how did that present itself? Without giving away what I know about it, what was your connection to the music scene?
It was really random. There was a fella who had come to, my father was a car mechanic, and this guy needed his car fixed, and he had come to, my dad worked out of my house. So he'd come to my house, and my dad, come downstairs and you talk to this guy. And I came down and talked to this dude, and he worked for Stone Temple Pilots. And they basically needed, for a bitch boy, they needed someone to work their ass off who would do whatever, just a grunt, I guess you could say. So I thought he was full of shit. I didn't believe him. And before you knew it, it was like a few days later, I was on a plane. I was flying out to Vegas to work for Stone Temple Pilots. And I had no idea. I mean, nobody told me anything about anything. I didn't know what I was doing. For the first couple of shows, I wore a white T-shirt because I didn't know I was even supposed to wear a black shirt. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of learned, but I had a lot of heart. And they kept me around, and I had a really awesome experience. And then from STP, it developed into, a career for a few years. It was a great opportunity.
And so when you were touring around with STP, what was the type of work you were doing? And what was interacting with the musicians of STP, and then also the other bands that you toured with?
I was going to make a joke. I mean, what did I do? On the Cranberries, I talk about how I fixed their ping pong table for most of the tour, because a ping pong table isn't really supposed to travel that much. So I really did. I spent so much time trying to get this ping pong table where I could put it in the truck without getting broken. But, I guess to take it seriously. So it depended what tour. In the beginning, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, so I did what anybody told me, and I was learning a ton, but I was doing stuff I would later find out really wasn't part of the job they had hired me for. But I went from being a carpenter to working as a lighting dude, and then inevitably as a stage manager. And it was cool. It's an interesting way to grow up. It's a very different world, and it's a lot of stress. There's a lot going on. So you're a young dude. You can do whatever you want. Nobody really cares, but you better do your job well. and it's a stressful gig. This is a big deal job. So you're
Mhm.
not the guy in the, in the office running the copy machine. So it was all kind of exciting. And then as far as interacting, it depends on what tour. So it depends on the budget, maybe. So like with Poison, you interact a lot because we all slept on the same buses as the band. We stayed in the same hotels as the band. So, we drank beers with the band. You're hanging out for better or for worse a lot. With STP, for example, the band had their own bus, and we every now and then I'd actually go stay on their bus because I could sleep on there and it was quiet. But you're not interacting as much. Also, what people don't think about is while you're sitting at the stage all day, the bands are doing interviews and they're doing press and whatnot, so they're not around.
Mhm.
So it kind of depends who you're with. And then lastly, if your band that you're working for, if they tell you the person's a prick, you wouldn't make a big deal to go up to the boss that you had been told was a prick because to talk to him. So, or you just don't want to get fired, so you don't go hang out with your bosses that much. So in the beginning, I think you don't really speak to a lot of these guys. But if you tour together for a while, whether you like it or not, you get to know each other, and hopefully, I'm pretty easygoing, so you
Mhm.
become friends. So I didn't have any really bad stories of any of the bands I worked for. I actually liked everybody.
Awesome. So, did you ever find that there was like a weird disconnect between like somebody that was directly working for the band, like a guitar tech or a drum tech, versus a third party contractor, like what I understand you were?
No, I work directly with the band too. So we're all work for hires. Even they're called backline guys, the guys who set up the instruments and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all really one and the same. The only separation would be your local stagehands.
Mm-hmm.
And the local stagehands, they don't travel with the band. They work for the venue,
Yep.
and they have a different band every night as the bands come through. But no, I work directly for the band. They were my bosses. And maybe a little bit of a spin would be I work for the headliner usually of the tour
Mm-hmm.
because as a stage manager, well, it depends on the size of the tour, I suppose. But so I might be working for example, I was working for Poison, and I talked this story about Quiet Riot when I didn't. Quiet Riot was not my employer; they never paid me, even
Mm-hmm.
though they open up for Poison, and we do tons and tons of shows together.
Sure. But you were still there to essentially set up the stage for the headliner.
Well, everybody helps out, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my job is keeping, and on that particular tour, Poison happy. They're the one who sends me my check.
Mm-hmm.
But part of keeping them happy is getting the bands on and off stage when they're supposed to, and helping out, and keeping everything aflow for everybody. Kind of a group deal.
Sure, definitely. So, how would you kind of define like what your day-to-day activities were? You've already kind of touched base on some of it, but like when you're actually in like the zone to work and getting set up, like what were your duties?
So it depends again what your role is, but let's say so the quickie is a carpenter. You don't actually swing a hammer too much. You're setting up all the fun stuff. You're setting up the stages and the backdrops, and you're making the stage look quote unquote good. As a lighting guy, you're setting up all the lights so they hopefully work. Lighting guy kind of sucks because the lights break all day and you're sitting there fixing lights all day. So I hated it. I didn't really like being a lighting guy.
Mm-hmm.
As a stage manager, you're doing a lot. You're kind of controlling everything to make sure everything goes smoothly. So when the band's off the stage, that's the tour manager's problem. When the band's on the stage, that's your problem. And you got to make sure everybody's A, safe, and B, the flow is important because if you go overtime, either the headliner doesn't get to play as long or you pay a fine on a lot of these places. They want you to shut up.
Sure.
So you get stuck. So you have those things to play with. But usually you wake up in the morning and you wash your hands, you take a crap, and within 5 minutes you're on the stage figuring out where the points go. Points are where the motors are hung.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're getting everything ready. So the motors go in, then the truss comes in, which is all the metal beams in the sky. And then off of those you hang lights, and then you pull it all up into the air, and then underneath start setting up your stage. And that's pretty much the day every single day. So the
So,
repetition's pretty cool.
what was it like for you, going from kind of wanting to be a part of Angelo's world and then actually becoming a part of that world and then eventually kind of reconnecting with him and like being like, hey, I'm here.
So, it was exciting. So what you're alluding to is my first tour. It just happened that Fishbone came on board and they were the opening band. So it was Fishbone, it was the Chili Peppers, and then it was STP.
Mm-hmm.
And I was super excited about touring with the Chili Peppers. I had Californication, and I think like everybody else listened to it every day. And this Fishbone thing was interesting. So he didn't know. So the first show he comes out and I'm like, hey dude, how's it going? Just totally matter of fact, real normal. And he's kind of looking at me like, what? We're in, let's say, Minnesota. I don't know where we were, but he's like, what the hell are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I got a job. Someone actually hired me. And it was really neat. The other side of it is it made me real comfortable because I had a guy who I kind of saw as my older brother. And maybe he would watch over me, and I don't know if he would have. But I brought him a lot of pizza, buddy. I got a huge amount of pizza from the STP bus, found its way in the Fishbone bus.
Nice.
But yeah, so it was kind of good. Not to mention, I thought their drum tech was gorgeous, so I'd go hang out all the time to talk to her.
Of course.
But it was good. It was really rewarding. And Angelo's father actually followed us on that tour. His dad was a really cool guy. His dad was a school teacher. If you're a big Fishbone fan, I don't know. But his dad also played music, even though I never saw him pick up a horn. But I guess he knew how, is what I was always told.
Mm-hmm.
So it was cool having Mr. Moore around. He was a good guy.
So how many bands did you end up actually touring with and working for?
Oh, geez. Well, if I'm on their actual payroll,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been STP, then Poison, Guns N' Roses, the Cranberries, NSYNC hired me for some stuff. Bush hired me for some stuff. And then you're working for all these other bands because if you're doing radio shows, there's tons of bands on the label
Mm-hmm.
or on the tour. Sorry. So you're doing you're interacting with dozens and dozens and dozens.
Sure.
But I'm not a lifer, so we call a lifer a guy who I guess obviously sticks around. He does tour
Right.
after tour forever, and that wasn't me. And so, not to jump ahead,
Mm-hmm.
but after Guns N' Roses, I used to say Guns N' Roses was my Rolling Stones, and they were my favorite band. And they're not really. They were my Guns N' Roses. They're not really. There's no need to compare.
Right.
And after I had worked for them, I sort of felt, because I was still a young guy, that maybe this trip had come to its culmination, and it was
Mm-hmm.
time for me to try something different. And so I did do some stuff after that, but I think that was the last tour that I really was all about it.
And then once kind of you made that decision that you weren't going to do another tour, what did you kind of set your sights on then?
Man, I didn't know. I decided to make a movie. It was called The Still Life. And I really figured if I stuck a bunch of rock stars in the movie, somebody would buy it, and maybe I could work in the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the film industry did something that the music industry doesn't do. They offered a thing called overtime. and I was sort of like, man, this would be a cool career. You just kind of hang out and you like, if you're a director, you just point your finger at people or something, and maybe they give you money for it. I don't know. I just got to get a bunch of rock stars. And I had no idea no clue. But I got Jonathan from Korn to be the liquor store clerk, and Josh Todd from Buck Cherry was my drunk dude in the bar, and
Nice.
Louise Post was our singer, and Dizzy from Guns was the piano player, and Matt Nelson was the guitar player. And I mean, even there's a liquor store scene, the guy waiting in line is from Blessed Unions of Soul. And anybody I could get who was a musician, like, yeah, sure, come on down tomorrow. And we'd stick them in the movie. And so it was really quite a bit of fun. The people in the line, by the way, were supposed to be the Cottonmouth Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And they no-showed.
Of course.
So, yeah, man, I tell you. But
Well, that's
it was a
cool.
fun ride. It was a fun ride. So the film was distributed by Warner Brothers. And when it was done, I did all the music, too. I wrote the songs. And so Darius Rucker sang a song, and, blah, 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 blah. I was, it's turning into a sales pitch. But didn't open any doors. It didn't really actually open the doors that I thought it would. Warner Brothers distributed it, but I didn't make any money.
Hmm.
And it was seen by some pretty heavy people. I'm really good friends with Michael Grace. He wrote Poltergeist, and he loved some of these old timer guys. What impressed them wasn't the movie. It was that you could make a film with well-known actors and stuff for 26 grand, which is what I made the film for.
Sure.
And so they were kind of looking like, what's happening to our world? So Coppola saw the film and Scorsese saw the film. It was cool, but it didn't create a career. And then, you start dabbling again. You start figuring out what you can do with your life. But it's exciting more than scary.
Absolutely. And, that's pretty cool that, the ability to make a movie on such a low budget is possible these days. It's kind of the same way that independent people, individuals are creating their own recording setups in their basements and putting albums out that way.
It's an awesome thing. I mean, for the professional musician, maybe it's scary because it's so accessible. But for the person having fun, it's awesome. I mean, this is pre-cell phones. You could shoot a film on your cell phone now. Hopefully it's not X-rated.
Well, one of the things that I always like to kind of champion on my channel is that there's so much saturation in the music industry that when independent artists and individuals are capable of putting out independently and solo recorded projects like that, it allows the listener to kind of fine tune what they actually like, what they want to listen to. They don't have to be, fed this line of top 40 from the mainstream music industry. They can really dive in and actually search for the personality that they want to listen to.
Yeah, I love it. I agree. I'm a Spotify guy, and it's just the world is at your fingertips. Literally, it's like everybody you can think of is on there, and it's great. You just get to listen to great music. Everybody, we all like music for the same reason. It's as a kid, you get that tingly feeling when you're like, oh my God, I got to listen to John Lennon Imagine again. And those moments keep coming as you find new performers that you're like, that was badass. Who's that
definitely.
guy?
So what are a couple of the main stories that kind of stick out in your memory of your time touring that, you'll kind of never let go of?
What's a story? I'm trying to think of something that's not in the book to keep it a bit of fun. There's one I've been telling. I think it's kind of funny. So I was dating this girl from Santa Barbara. She was this younger girl. And I was in a bar called The Backstage. It was in Hollywood. And it was owned by the drummer from the Police's brother. And so it was pretty quiet in there. There was I think we were at the big table, and it was me and 15 women. I was the only guy for some reason. And in the bar walks Jimmy Page. And he didn't have a fat guy suit on or a mustache or anything. It just looked like fucking Jimmy Page. And he cruised into the bar, and this lady at the table with us, she's like, I know Jimmy, so she got up and she asked him to sit at the table. So he cruises over. He shakes everyone's hand but mine. And I'm thinking oh, come on. But it was only because I was at the far end of the table, right? But I got a nod. I got a bro nod. So he sits down at the table and he's hanging out. And I'm sitting there, and my girlfriend at the time, she's talking and she doesn't know who he is. I'm like, he's wrote Stairway to Heaven. She's like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. Just nothing. Totally didn't care. So this lady, she's like, I used to be one of your groupies in the early 70s.
Oh, shit.
So Jimmy Page gets up and he leaves the table, and I'm looking at her like, dude, you just scared away Jimmy Page. What the fuck, lady? So a couple years later, I was writing with Dean Dinning. He's the bass player of Toad the Wet Sprocket. And the girl, I told you she was from Santa Barbara. So she's like, you're working with who? I'm like, yeah, it's Toad the Wet Sprocket. All I want is and she's like, wow. So I called Dean and I'm like, bro, you're bigger than Jimmy Page. So bit of fun.
Nice. So, is any of the stuff you're working on published or anything aside from your book? Can people check out any of the music you're writing?
Well, I'm actually done recording the audio book, and we're putting in a song that hasn't been released yet that I wrote with Dizzy from Guns N' Roses. And so that will kind of weave in and out of the book. We actually wrote it about a decade ago, but nobody ever heard it yet. So if you're a Guns fan, you'll like it. It's super 80s and it's
Hmm.
kick ass.
Awesome.
So it's a really good track. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on a lot lately. And then, I mean, if you like the Still Life is on Amazon. I don't know how good it is, but you know, it was done cheap.
It's definitely worth checking out. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of fun. I don't know. Yeah, it was a phase, and the book's doing good. You know, it's like number 10 on Amazon, number 8 on Amazon. It fluctuates, and I'm friends with John, who's the drummer for
Mhm.
actually percussionist for Elton John.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
nice. Very cool.
yeah, oh yeah, he's a cool guy too. So my book was like at 8, and they change it every hour. So my book was like 8, and Elton John was at 10. And I wrote to him like, "Who's this guy, dude? Look at that, man! Look at that!" So I wrote back, "That's fantastic." I'm like, "I'm just gonna call my next album Captain Fantastic," and nobody got it. And I'm kind of like, "Come on, guys, it's funny."
Well, I
Captain
would definitely
Fantastic.
recommend the book. It was definitely worth the read. That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. That's really cool of you.
So what I like to do is I like to give the person I'm interviewing like the last word. So basically just a message that you feel kind of resonates with you that you want to put out there.
Just tell me how great my book was again, and that'll be fine. Last word. Just read it hoping that you get a laugh or two, because that's all I really wanted. It's not the book of sex scandals and crazy shit with rock stars, because it's just not me. So if you want to read crazy scandal stuff, the Motley Crue book is supposed to be awesome. So give that a read. But it's more of the passionate music guy. And it's funny. I mean, I know it is. It's a funny book. It's very entertaining. So I hope people enjoy it, and you can get it on Amazon.